Hi, I'm your host, Michael Dowden, and here with me today is Dr. Matthias Biehl, expert in API strategy. Welcome, Matthias, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So we were in London together in the last few weeks where you gave a talk, Enterprise APIs at MCP, the missing link to AI innovation. So can you please explain for us how MCP enables AI innovation with APIs?
Yes, absolutely. So the first question I like to ask always is why do we care about these subjects, right? Why APIs, why MCP, and so forth. And when I talk to my clients, then I very much hear in the last, let's say, 6 months to a year, that they get requirements from the top level management about becoming AI ready, becoming agent ready, and that's where MCP plays a role. So what these top-level management people want to have is an agentic enterprise. That's the vision they strive for, right? And an agentic enterprise means, just to imagine it, is in every department, for every role in an organization, you will have AI agents sitting right next to the people who are already filling this role. So you will, as a worker in a big enterprise, have colleagues that are AI agents, right? And those AI agents will need to be enabled, they will need to be built, and they will need to be built for each specific enterprise because
Mhm.
those AI agents are only effective if they can leverage the data and the functionality of that specific enterprise. And that's how we come to the topic of MCP and APIs, right? AI agents are all about LLMs and the new AI models, but, and that gets forgotten so much, they're also about leveraging the data. Those models, they have generic knowledge. They've read all the Wikipedia articles basically, but they don't know anything about the specific enterprise, the specific customers, the specific systems that you need to connect. And that happens via MCP. Now, building MCP, it's the Model Context Protocol, is very similar to APIs. It's all about interfaces. And I like to talk about interfaces for a long time, right? I've been in this API space. We've mostly talked about RESTful APIs. So that's the kind of the protocol that we use for it. But the principles and the concepts behind it, making things accessible programmatically,
Yeah,
are also applying to MCP. So
right.
each organization will, next to their API landscape, in the future have to build an MCP landscape that can be leveraged by those AI agents. And yeah, so that's why
Okay.
I
Yeah.
talk about it. And now we can come to your question. Um, so if you want to ask your question again for
Yeah, of course. So, how does MCP enable AI innovation with APIs? And to piggyback on something you said earlier, is it like kind of parallel to your API landscape, or do they sit on top of each other?
very good question. So um, APIs have been there first. Lots of organizations have built APIs for the last 10 years. Lots of investment, lots of expertise also is already in APIs and those RESTful APIs. And that can be leveraged now. And you can basically go a small step on top of your existing API landscape and enable all these APIs, RESTful APIs, and kind of automatically transform a couple of those APIs in your landscape. And we can talk about which of those APIs should be considered for being upgraded into MCP. Yeah, and you take those, and it's not a lot of work to get MCP interfaces out of them, which then those agents can use. Now, which of those existing APIs make sense to be transformed into MCP? Sometimes people ask me, and for new APIs that I'm supposed to build, shall I only build MCP and forget about those RESTful APIs once and for all? I think there's, of course, different best practices around
Hmm.
this, but the best practice that makes a lot of sense to me is that you continue to invest in your RESTful API landscape and you build APIs even for new functionality
Yeah.
as a starting point so that those APIs can be leveraged in existing digital channels for mobile applications, for web applications, for partner integrations, for building digital ecosystems, right? All these cool things can be done on the basis of REST APIs. And then some of those APIs make sense to be exposed to agents. Now, I've teased you about this, which of those makes sense. So I like to classify the existing API landscape of enterprises in 3 different categories of APIs. And only for 1 or 2 of those categories, it really makes sense to convert them into MCP endpoints. So if you look at your API landscape, you have probably system APIs. That's low-level APIs. All they do is they take data and functionality that's in the backend systems, could be an SAP system, a CRM system, something in your enterprise, and they convert it into the API landscape, into the API world, right? So now you can access this data programmatically via a REST call. That's all they do. There's no specifics about the company or so in those APIs.
Yeah.
That comes in the next category. The next category that lies on top of these APIs is typically a process API or a business API. Here, you basically orchestrate several of those system APIs into a process that's specific to your organization. Mm-hmm. Business logic goes into those business APIs or process APIs, right? And that makes sense. Those are typically higher level APIs. They are more abstract, right? Closer to a business intent or business functionality, and they make sense to be exposed to an AI agent because AI agents are thinking kind of abstractly top down, and they basically can leverage those intent-based business APIs much better than putting together manually a step-by-step process out of 5 system APIs. So and the third category are experience APIs. So experience APIs are variants of process APIs. They are very lightweight typically, and they expose the business process for different types of consumers. So for example, if you have a customer API exposing the data of a customer, then in some use cases, it might make sense and is allowed to have the birthday of the customer exposed. In other use cases, for compliance reasons or whatever, you are not allowed to expose the birthday.
Yep.
Right? And for that use case, you typically create a variant, an experience API, which is very easy to build because it just filters out certain attributes. And we've done this for as long as we have APIs, basically. Now we call these experience APIs when the consumer is not just any web application or mobile application, but an AI agent.
Yeah.
We call those context APIs, right? But it's the same idea, the same concept. You filter out certain attributes so it makes sense for the consumer of these APIs. Right. So context APIs are what we build for bringing context to those AI agents, and same principles apply. Also, they make sense to be exposed as MCP. So I would say either the business APIs or the context APIs / experience APIs, those are really good candidates if you go through your list of APIs to be exposed via MCP. And then the actual exposure, taking a very well-designed REST API and putting it out in the MCP protocol so it is callable and so forth, that's actually a mechanical process that doesn't require a lot of additional engineering. That can be mechanically translated, and there are products out there that can do that for you.
Sure. So let me take a step back and clarify something really quickly. When you're talking about the MCP, you're talking about agents that are running in production. How might this differ from perhaps agents you have helping you build the code in the first place? Because the agents we have building code, a lot of times we want those agents writing the lower level code that is less interesting to us. And a lot of times it's the developer that's focused more on the business side of the code. But on the flip side, in the API landscape, you're saying push the agents more towards the business side and less towards some of the lower level APIs.
Yeah. So we can put, of course, agents into existence for doing different things.
Right.
So, right, there are like if you want to categorize the agents that you could build, you can have coding agents, right? That's where a lot of Claude
Mhm.
code and so forth, what
Yep.
these developments go. They basically help the developer become more productive and more efficient. Those are coding agents. And yes, MCP plays a role there too. But it's a very specific use case and applications of the generic agent technology just for the purpose of coding.
Right.
And then you can have business agents. And business agents apply for any role, not only coding
Mhm.
roles, but any type of role, right? So the HR department, the IT department that helps you order a new mobile phone or something like that, or helps you fix a bug on your PC or something like that, they also have the potential to get value out of business agents
Mhm.
now. And I think the broader term is the business agent. And that's what I was referring to when I was talking about the agentic enterprise,
Nice.
because the agentic enterprise is kind of this all encompassing idea and vision where every department, every role would be affected, not only the coding role. But of course, if maybe the developers and the coding agents are, so to say, trailblazers because developers are very open towards exploring new technology, and maybe they are the first in the organization to explore agents that are very close to their
Mhm.
role. But I think other parts of the organization are equally interesting, or maybe even more interesting, to be exposed to agent technology and getting productivity gains through agents. So yeah, I think makes a lot of sense to have agents on all these different roles.
Sure. 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 Okay. So how did we get here? What does the trajectory or the development of the technology look like from your perspective? I know you've spent a long time in the API landscape and obviously now in AI. What are some of the steps or the key pivotal moments that got us where we are today?
So if we look at, for example, how agents were built or how AI technology was leveraged since 2023, maybe when the first public chat GPT was launched,
Right.
I mean, that was basically the start of where everything changed, where people saw ChatGPT producing these really well formulated answers to a quick question that you had, and business got inspired and said, "Well, we want to have this as well." And in every company, people said, "Yeah, we want to build this cool technology into our product, and we want to leverage it to the max." And in 2023, people were experimenting with those LLMs. I call it naked LLMs because there was nothing around those LLMs, right? We did
Right.
some prompt engineering. Maybe that was the maximum we did. You remember maybe in those days, people said, "Oh, there's a new job coming out, and it's going to be the prompt engineer," right? No one talks about this anymore, but
Nope.
prompt engineering still is a valuable piece of the
Right.
whole thing, right? But that kind of illustrates the milestones we have gone through. The first step was really how do we prompt and give context in a prompt to an agent, and it was mostly text in, text out, right? Those agents or those AI projects, they didn't do anything except produce text. They were kind of passive. They were
Right.
just spitting out text. And they were not very specific to your enterprise.
Right.
Right? They were just responding based on the corpus of knowledge that they have been trained on. Wikipedia, they've read a couple of books from the library, right? And that's what their response was based on. Not so relevant from a business perspective yet, because
Yeah.
as a business, you need to solve customer problems, right? And
Yeah.
there's no data in there for customers. So the next step, the next milestone we went through was the RAG architecture, the RAG reference architecture. It's basically retrieval augmented generation. That's what
Mhm.
RAG stands for. And in a RAG-based architecture, you already get a little bit of enterprise knowledge into those
Yeah.
LLMs, right? And the way you do it is that you have a database of your enterprise knowledge that could be like your wiki articles to solve certain typical customer issues, for example, right? And you just have this as a database, and then you do a search, a semantic search on this database. People use then this vector database and embeddings and semantic search technology, just basically to search the snippet out of this big corpus of enterprise-specific data that is relevant, and then they inject that into the prompt, right? The prompt that we had before in the naked LLM reference architecture is still there.
Yep.
Now we
Yep,
just
yep.
have a little bit more context, but it's all static context. The AI project still can't do anything, and it produced still a little bit more relevant output and a little bit more specific, individualized output. The third architecture now that we see right now, and the most advanced one, are AI agents. They differ by using all the things we've done before, right? They use a little bit of prompt engineering, they use a little bit of RAG, but on top of that, they can leverage endpoints in the organization. They can leverage MCP to reach into the enterprise and read additional data, real-time data that is, right? So what the customer has done recently, what he had in the shopping cart just a moment ago, all this data that would be very hard to get into a RAG database or so is there. And in addition, something we couldn't ever do before is that the agent now can act. That means it has data from the environment, and then it can act on this data in its environment. And that's typically the digital environment, right? It can, for example, write something to a database, or it can change something in a system. And of course, because of the link of the digital and the real world, this will have an effect in the real world. An agent can now go shopping if you would allow it to do that, right? It can basically do a payment, but it can also maybe do a refund. If it's a customer service agent, can do a refund. If it's kind of convinced that the customer has a point there, it can do a refund, issue a refund. And that's something we couldn't do before. Now, maybe it makes sense that we explore in a little bit more detail this reference architecture of the AI agent.
Please.
What is an AI agent, right? And I typically like to explain it by first looking at the characteristics. If we have a good AI agent, what do we think those AI agents need to do? So first, they should be somehow intelligent, right? Intelligent. The second thing is they should be autonomous, and they should kind of work with their environment. They shouldn't be isolated from it. They should interact with their environment. And that means they can have knowledge about this environment, real time or near real time, and they should kind of do something, act in this environment. And the third thing is kind of extending on this interacting with the environment, they should also interact and collaborate with other AI agents, because an AI agent is like a specialist, right? And we all know, as specialists, right, in our field, we can only like really get big projects done if we work with other specialists that have other specializations. So in order for this AI agent, agentic enterprise vision to work out, there will be the need for AI agents to find other AI agents they can collaborate with and hand off a part of their work that they have been assigned to this other AI agent, wait for them to produce the results, kind of the intermediary results, and then integrate these results back into their overall problem solving. So we have three things: intelligence, interacting with the environment, and collaboration. And now these are just super high level characteristics. How do we put this into IT? How do we actually get this done when we build an AI agent? Intelligence, well, easy. We do that with AI models and with those LLM technologies. We need to access them. Then how do we get information about the context, the digital context? Well, we do that via MCP by connecting via the MCP protocol, the AI agent, with the enterprise systems that we have. And then for collaboration, there's another protocol. It's the A2A protocol, agent to agent protocol. that helps you do exactly that. Find other AI agents, know what their specialty is, and then basically doing the handover for those AI agents. So I think,
Yeah.
once you have those three components in place, that's where you differentiate, and that's what you should do in order to build great AI agents for your enterprise.
This is a really great detailed context on the technology involved. So thank you for that. Um, I've read a lot about this, but that's the most succinct, detailed explanation I've heard. So that very well done. Uh, in the context of that answer, do you find that it is the technical challenges that are the hardest part of implementing kind of an agentic environment, or is it more the business friction, or maybe something else like getting the data in the right place?
Yeah, very good point right now. So I will tell you what I see in organizations, right? You have this top level management that says build AI agents, right? To the IT leaders in the field and the IT architect and head of IT, they now have this task of figuring out how do we get this done with the AI agents. So lots of pressure, basically on these roles.
Yeah.
And then when I look at what is actually being built and delivered,
Mhm.
I see that we have cool prototypes being built all over, right? Everywhere people build cool AI agents that look the part, right? Until you see, hey, this is just a prototype. We haven't really released that yet. That's not in production. The customers can't read that,
Mhm.
right? But in order for getting those productivity gains and getting those efficiency gains that top level management actually wants to have, there's no way then also releasing those AI agents into production, getting them in front of customers. Only then they will become effective, right? So we
Right.
need to do that, but we're not there yet. So there's this big gap between prototypes and production. So in prototype land, we make cool things. In production, we don't. So why
Yes.
do you
Okay.
think that is? Yeah,
That's a great question.
it is. So there have been. I'll tell you what they have found out in
Right.
studies. So Forrester, McKinsey,
Okay.
Gartner have done studies. Even the MIT, so the
Yeah.
NADA report from MIT, they basically found out people don't trust these agents, right? It's a
Ah,
trust issue.
sure.
They say, like, we can't let those agents run on our data.
Hmm.
Who knows what they're going to do with,
Yeah.
right? And also, the other thing, more technical, more operational, is well, how do we connect those agents to our enterprise data? So
Okay.
there's one overarching conceptual issue, and
Right.
there is one more IT issue that we can actually fix, but which
Right.
hasn't been fixed so far, which is we need to focus on integration. We need to
Yeah.
focus on integrating those AI agents into our enterprise. And that basically means focusing on the APIs, on the interfaces, focusing on the integration technology. And that's something we can fix.
Yeah.
Now, the trust issue, that's a very interesting thing to attack, right?
It
So
is.
how do you actually build trust in AI agents? And yeah, everyone could think about this here in this podcast. How would you actually, or what kind of agents would you trust more, right? So there's these agents that can run around freely and do whatever they want.
Mhm.
And then there are agents that you have constrained in some
Mhm.
form, right? You have given them guardrails. You have given them rules. You have said until here and not further. And you, for example, give them rights, access rights to certain things, and other things are just forbidden.
Mhm.
You tell them they can work with this other agent and not with that other agent,
Yeah.
right? So you put really rules in place, and that's what we then call governance, right? If you look at
Right.
this from a global perspective or from an enterprise perspective, there are global rules on what AI agents can do and what they
Right.
can't do. Now, there's different places where in the organization we can then enforce these rules because we don't just want to write a big document on Confluence and then it lives there on our wiki, right? That's not helpful. We need to operationalize these
Yeah.
constraints. They need to actually be enforced. There needs to be a
Yes.
policeman basically and standing there and say, yeah, you're allowed to pass and you're not.
Enforced
So
and
how,
verifiable. Like you need to be able
yeah.
to see that. Yeah.
So where in our organization and maybe even where in our architecture
Yeah.
would be the proper place to actually enforce these rules and constraints, right? And there are a couple of places, right? So if you think about, you can, of course, enforce them all the way on top of every AI agent. Like when you're building the AI agent, you can put these rules and constraints into the code of this AI agent. That's one place. But sometimes maybe those AI agents are built outside the organization. You can't
Sure.
put rules in there. Maybe there's third-party agents that you get and that you might want to leverage.
Yeah.
So then you have another chance of putting some rules in place, and that's exactly at this interface level. And we've previously looked at those three different components of AI agents,
Mhm.
and the agent needs to reach and access every component. So at this place of access, that's where we can enforce those rules and constraints. So for example, for intelligence, yeah, that was the first component,
Right.
the
Exactly.
LLM. When the AI agent wants to reach an LLM, it needs to make a network call. It needs to make an API call, typically an LLM API call. And that's the place when we can put something in place there that intercepts that call, enforces a couple of policy
Sure.
rules, and then forwards the call or blocks it,
Mhm.
right? And that's a typical application of a gateway.
Yeah.
And in the API space, we have worked with gateways like forever, right?
Yeah. Ever.
The concept has been there, right? We always have looked at, okay, there's a request coming from the outside world to our API.
Yeah.
Now let's authenticate it. Let's transform the request. Let's maybe put some quotas or rate limiting in place so our servers don't get overloaded. And exactly this technology at the right place can be injected in all three components of the AI agent.
Sure.
LLM we've looked at. Now, if we looked at the MCP, equally there, we would put an MCP gateway in place here. And that MCP gateway can enforce all these rules, and it could also do the protocol conversion for us, right? So if we already have an existing REST API as a backend, then it
Right.
can automatically transform this protocol into the MCP protocol. And then, of course, an A2A gateway for the third leg
Mhm.
of the agent, enforcing those interactions with other agents.
So you posted recently that the next wave of AI in the enterprise won't be defined by who builds the most agents, but by who governs them responsibly at scale. And I think that's right on point, but it begs the question, which I would like to hear your thought. Who is responsible for governing the agents? Or to phrase it a different way, what role in the organization should be responsible for the AI governance and putting in place these guardrails we just discussed?
Very good question. And I think organizations are trying to figure that out, right? So, and I've talked to organizations. I see three approaches that organizations right now,
Okay.
different organizations take to answer that question.
Sure.
The first one is when there is already like a established AI competence center,
Mhm.
then sometimes this AI competence center takes on the role of creating MCP endpoints. They create the agents, they put the constraints in place, and they own then an MCP gateway, they own an A2A gateway or an
Mhm.
LLM gateway, and they are the right people in the organization. In other organizations where maybe you have already a strong integration and API governance team,
Sure.
then they take on that role and they say, oh, we've done this for the last 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
We know how that works. And I think they have a good point, right? And they say MCP is just another protocol, right? We've done SOAP, we've done gRPC, we've done REST. MCP is just another one of
Right.
these protocols, right? And they can then handle a big portfolio, APIs, MCP, agents, everything in one place. So
Yeah.
that's the other approach that I see. And then I see a third approach where in the organization there is this awareness, that we have already people who are good at APIs. We have the requirements for AI. Let's just bring them together. And then we see new roles where people say, I'm head of AI and API governance, right? So they merge these roles because they see there's so much overlap in knowledge and also in how you handle things in the organization. How do you actually enforce it? Because putting the technology in place is one thing, but then getting it accepted by the rest of the organization is a completely other thing and a
Right.
completely other challenge. And we've done good work in the API space, right? You can
Right.
apply a lot of this best practice, and I mean some of these more soft skills to get this
Yes.
technology accepted, and I think they have a point there. So three different approaches. I cannot
Sure.
say which one is winning right now. Um, Maybe if we talk again in half a year, I can tell you from my customer interactions which
Yeah,
one
for
is maybe the
sure.
best. But
Right.
yeah, people try to figure it out. So very timely question you ask.
And it's the space of governance to me is always interesting. I think in the context of AI and API specifically, it is a role that demands both technical expertise and a deep understanding of the business risk profile, because there's a risk profile to governance. There's an understanding of potentially the legal and governmental landscape, as well as the technical implementation and understanding how reliable that technical implementation is, the limitations of it, that sort of thing. So it's an interesting mixed type of role in applying governance
Absolutely.
well.
So governance people need to work. It's a multi-dimensional challenge they have, right? They need to work with legal people. They need
Yeah,
to work with marketing.
yeah,
They need to work with IT risk, security people. So, and of course, business, right?
hmm,
Because when you have a risk on one side, you want to say,
yes,
is this risk worth taking for the
right,
business we can gain
right,
through
right,
that?
right.
And this is all questions we've had with API technology to some extent already. Maybe what's new now is that it's all just getting bigger. The risks are getting bigger, and also the possible opportunities that we
Sure.
have from this technology are also getting bigger. So it basically just makes the the challenges we had in this
Yeah,
field just magnifies them.
right.
So if I hear myself talk now, it would basically speak for taking people that already are working in this field of APIs for a while and let them apply their knowledge there
Right.
in AI.
I wonder how specific industries or even perhaps specific countries will defer in the approach to this challenge over the next few months or years as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's always front runner industries,
Mhm.
maybe those industries that don't have much to lose, so to say. Uh, no, no, I mean where the data is not so critical.
Sure, sure.
So if you think about when the APIs came along, it was the social media companies who were
Yeah.
typically leading the field and were the first ones to try things out publicly.
Mhm.
If you remember, like the Twitter API in the early days, right? And until banks came,
Yeah.
maybe then 8, 10 years later, after the social media companies have opened up, but they also produced APIs. There is just much more risk involved if
Mhm.
you have money,
Of
right,
course. Yeah,
or
absolutely.
critical data, um, right? That it just takes a little bit more time. The technology matures.
Right.
So I think different industries maybe are leading or lagging a little bit. Um, yes, and I think that has good reasons
Yeah.
also. I'm not too deep into the compliance aspects and which country is kind of a little bit more relaxed about data privacy in which
Right.
country is a little in respect to AI, and which country is a little bit more restrictive. Yeah, we will see. My impression is that in Europe there's a lot of kind of it's a little bit more on the
Mm.
cautious side, and maybe in the US people are willing to move a little bit faster, but we will see. Especially when first incidents are happening.
Right.
Yeah, there's a couple of incidents already where agents maybe have deleted a database, and that informs people then, right? And that
It does.
shows. So these first incidents, they show people what the risk actually is, creates awareness.
Yes.
It's painful for the people who have experienced it in their
Mhm.
organization, but I mean, on us, it is basically to learn from those other
Absolutely.
organizations that had this pain so that it doesn't
Yeah.
happen in our house, basically. Yeah.
So when you have incidents like that, obviously it erodes trust not just for that organization, it actually erodes trust for the technology and for the industry as a whole in many cases. So do you have any suggestions? Because you mentioned early on in this conversation that trust was kind of a big thing to adoption of the new technologies. How do we address some of those issues in a responsible way, but that keeps things moving forward?
Right. That's the delicate balance we have to find. We want to be on the forefront of innovation, which means taking some risks.
Yeah.
On the other side, we also want to kind of not be on the front page of the news
Yeah.
for the wrong reasons. And here we should kind of look into best practices, especially when it comes to security, to governance, and kind of apply what has worked in the past.
Sure.
So opening up an API without proper security, bad idea. Same applies for an MCP endpoint, right? And it shouldn't come as a surprise when I say it like this with this analogy, but due to the pressure, you remember top level management wants to see results on AI agents. Then sometimes people create prototypes, they cut corners,
Yes,
security,
yes, yes,
maybe we
yes.
can just quickly bring something out, right? So that's why these things or how these things are happening. And I think there, the responsibility of a good engineer is to lift the hand and
Right,
say, like, not a good idea to bring
right.
that out without proper constraints, without proper security. There are best practices around securing MCP endpoints. It's basically the OAuth 2.1 protocol that has been around in the API space. There's a lot of best practice, a lot of products that support you in implementing that in the right way.
Mhm.
Leverage that, right? And it's then basically on everyone. It's not only the responsibility of the IT security people, the CISO in your organization, but no, it's every engineer who sees something that
Sure.
is potentially risky to lift the hand, wave the red flag, and say, well, we need to focus on that.
So, would you say there's any either developers or any organizations who probably shouldn't consider MCP right now? And on the flip side, do you think there's a long-term penalty for organizations that don't really start adopting MCP at this point?
Yeah, so I think with the AI technology, everyone should be an innovator and should try it out and should test it. And if an organization leans back, that can't be good for the long-term prospects of that company. So I think it's on everyone to try to figure out how can we use this technology in our environment. And I think just leaning back and not do anything because we haven't figured out every aspect of it is the wrong approach, right?
Right,
Otherwise, this speed train of AI will take off and it will leave some companies behind, and it shouldn't be yours.
right. Absolutely. You touched on this before, and we didn't really discuss it in depth. How do we design APIs that will be chosen by AI agents rather than human developers?
Wow, yeah, great question. So what we have looked at is this classification of different types of APIs,
Mhm.
right? We have, just to recap, system APIs, business or process APIs, and then these context or experience APIs. So let's look at these business APIs. How are they different than the system APIs? They typically address a business issue. You can explain a business or process API to a business person, and they understand what that is. If you bring them a system API that just store customer record or something like that, they don't even know what that is. That sounds too technical to them. So I would say, kind of, if you can explain that API to a business person and they understand, that really makes a lot of sense and it brings value to us, then that is an API that would be valuable also for an AI agent. High-level APIs, right? Not low-level, higher level of abstraction, and a business process behind it that's specific to your organization.
Okay, very good. How has your approach to API design changed as you've moved into developing MCP and agentic development processes?
Good question. So there are two aspects of how it has changed. So the first aspect is getting clarity of how MCP and the REST APIs that we've designed for so long time, how those two relate. And my approach is right now that I say start with the REST APIs and design your APIs as we have been preaching for the last 5 years or so. So that means, and then move to MCP. Right. So what have we said for the last 5 years? Use the open API specifications. Specify first, design first the API, and then implement it later. Prototype it and implement it. That also means that you should do a customer-centric design. Right? So you think about your customer or your client first and who it actually is, and then design from that insight what they would need as data. So now it's these AI agents who are your API consumers, right? So think about what they would probably want to have. With humans, you can always go and invite those potential API consumers to your organization. You can say, let's have a workshop and figure out what you need. And then we're going to design an API exactly for your needs. Whether that's then an experience API or a process API or a combination of those. With AI agents, that's of course not the case. You can't invite the AI agents to come over and tell you what they need. But there's a couple of best practices when you think about it. That's don't design complicated APIs. Sometimes I see those APIs that have like 50 fields of input and 100 fields for output and so many different parameters, and depending on that parameter, it behaves different over here. Those APIs are not good for AI agents. AI agents want to have very simple, clear APIs that do one thing, but do that correctly. So try to kind of dumb it down, your API design, for the AI agents. That would be my overarching advice.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So if there's anybody out there not currently leveraging AI agents, is there something specific you would suggest to get started with, like a starting point?
Yeah, a good starting point would be to figure out building your first AI agent, just to see how all the different parts interact. There are great frameworks, open source frameworks, commercial frameworks that help you put together an AI agent without a lot of work, right? So try to leverage those, build an AI agent on a simple use case that you really just use for learning, and then go and build your first MCP endpoint, again, based on this idea. REST endpoint first, create or mechanically an MCP endpoint for that. And then maybe a second step would be try to apply AI technology also on your AI agent or on your API design or on your AI agent design, right? So use an AI agent to create an AI agent, or use an AI agent to create your API design or your MCP design. Right? So you can, for example, right now, ask any of those big models to help you create an open API specification for
Mhm.
a specific use case, right?
Okay.
You give it some constraints and you say, this is the kind of API I want to build, and you can iterate on that.
Okay.
But we don't want to lose the basics. So I think there's still some value in trying to understand what is it actually that it is doing. But then when you go and work on an actual project in real life, you don't need to go in every step all the way down the stack, so to say, and figure out exactly what it is doing. But once you have understood it once, you have an intuitive understanding of what it is doing, and that will help you put all the pieces together in a cohesive way. So yeah, apply AI technology on lots of things, including your API design.
Nice. Okay. So later this year, it looks like you've got a number of speaking engagements, including API conference in both New York and Berlin. And I see a topic at those events, transforming into an agentic enterprise. Would you like to drop a teaser for what that talk is going to look like?
Absolutely. So it's basically for the people who are in this situation that we've
Okay.
described in this podcast as well. They get the requests from their management. The top level management says, build more AI agents, get the organization ready for AI agents. Now, what do we do? And
Mhm.
especially for the API people, right? So what does it mean to have an AI ready API? And where would the AI agent and AI agent governance, where would that land? Who would own the topic?
Yeah.
What do we have to do? And how do we actually enforce all these constraints that we need to put in place to create trust and to make this agentic enterprise vision work? So all these topics we will look at
Nice.
and we'll discuss it in depth. We will combine it with best practices for API security and
Mhm.
API design. So it's basically going all the way through the stack from AI to MCP and to API design underneath. I'm
Nice.
looking forward to these instances.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. So last two questions for you. First one, what do you think is next in the API space or in the MCP space?
Yeah, so I think right now we focus on APIs and MCP.
Mhm.
And in the future, we will, once we have a couple of really good AI agents, think about how do these AI agents work together,
Okay.
right? So that will
Collaboration.
be the major big topic I think that we will have coming up. So the A to A
Nice.
protocol or whatever it's going to be then, there's a lot in
Yeah.
flux, might be another protocol. But how do we actually think about and how do we cut basically what one agent is responsible for
Sure.
tackling and another agent is doing, and how do we bring those expertises together?
Right.
How do we orchestrate it? Is it dynamic? Will there be some lookup in some directory somewhere where all the experts are registered? It will be an exciting space, and I think yeah, if I think back to how we have built API-based digital ecosystems, a lot of these technologies might be applicable. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm really excited about this space, but A2A protocol will be super, super exciting.
Cool, cool, cool. Good deal. So, what is your number one takeaway that you want to leave the audience with today in this conversation?
The biggest thing you need to make sure right now is that people build trust in AI agents. And we have looked at um, governance as
Mhm.
one mechanism to put this trust, to enforce this trust and to put it into practice.
Mhm.
And our technology with gateways that we know from the API space, that's exactly the technology that we can leverage at this place as well. So let's use this expertise and knowledge and technology to get trust in AI agents.
Nice. So leverage well-established existing technologies to implement the guardrails around the new technology to help establish trust.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Matthias, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. It's been a great conversation and very, very enlightening.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you so much.